So, everyone, I heard that Jeff the Killer, one of the most interesting creepypasta stories, has been given a new, rewritten story by YouTuber Pastra. So, what are we waiting for? Let's react to it. Hello, everyone. My name is Grim Harvest, and welcome to another Halloween's Day. Now, for those people who don't know what a Halloween's Day is, for those people that don't know what Halloween's Day is, I have promised not to say that again, but I guess I will show it to you guys instead. Roll the audio clip. Now, for those who don't know what Halloween's Day is, Halloween's Day is where every Wednesday we all will come together and do everything related to Halloween. Rather it be watching scary videos, listening to scary music. Heck, they don't even need to be scary, just related to Halloween. And if you all have anything you want us to look at, just go to Rewatch's X accounts and tell us in the comments what you want us to see. Now enough talk. Everyone, get your Halloween candy and enjoy. Anyway, now that you guys know what Halloween's Day is, today we are reacting to I Rewrote Jeff the Killer by YouTuber Pastra. So, as you see, all these stories are in chapters, so we won't be able to react to all of them, especially because this is an hour-long video. So we're only going to react to 2. Alright, now let's begin. Warning. This video contains the following content which may be triggering to some viewers. Mentions of okay, self-harm, drugs and drug abuse, graphic descriptions of violence. Okay then. Wasn't expecting that. Strap in. Okay. Chapter 1. J. Douglas.
Rain poured down on Carpenter's Landing relentlessly. It was one of the worst storms the town had seen in years, and it showed no signs of stopping. Lightning flashed throughout the sky in massive bursts, with booming thunder following soon after. Following yet another long night of drinking alone in his dingy apartment, J. Douglas tried to sleep despite the storm. Long black curtains covered his window to shield his eyes from the bright flashes that came and went, but he was left defenseless to the explosive sounds that always followed. His digital clock struck 2 in the morning when one such sound woke him from his deep sleep. The thunder was louder than before, reverberating through his entire room so loudly he could feel it shaking. The sound startled him awake, shooting up from his bed and swinging around his arms in such a fashion that it knocked over an empty bottle that had sat on his nightstand next to him. It fell to the ground loudly, hitting first against the lamp that sat next to it and then rattling against the floorboards, aggravating the hangover he could already feel coming on. Fuck, he mumbled to himself.
I'm not going to lie, I was not expecting that. I was definitely not expecting that.
As he put his hand to his forehead and stared at the clock next to him. The pain in his head came in short, stinging bursts. It felt like at any moment it might split open. As his hand touched his forehead, he could also feel the cold sweat that had collected there. That was when he felt the draft. He slowly looked around his room, trying to identify the source of the mild breeze that brushed across his body. The window remained closed, the black curtain over it maintaining its stillness. The old dusty fan he kept in the far right corner of his room was turned off, just as he left it. He jumped suddenly at the sight of a dark silhouette in the corner of his room. Quickly, he turned his body over on its side, turning on the lamp next to him. It illuminated the room in an instant, revealing the shadow to be nothing more than the pile of dirty laundry he had let sit there for well over a week. God damn it, he said to himself, letting out a weak, sarcastic chuckle as he continued to observe his surroundings. The lamp helped him identify the origin of the breeze, with his sights finally locking on the left side of his room. The door was left ajar, slowly pushing open as if something had made contact with it. That was odd. Jay lived alone, and he could have sworn that he closed the door behind him when he got home from work that night. He threw the thin blankets he was covering himself with off his bed, getting up to investigate. He nearly tripped over the bottle left on the floor as he made his way towards the door, cursing to himself as he struggled to regain balance. As he made his way to the door, he grabbed a hold of it to stop its movement, peering out into the darkness of his apartment to see what could have caused it to be left open. He turned to the left, being greeted only by the darkness of the hallway before him, then to the right, staring into his living room. That was when he noticed something else that seemed off. The window to his living room was left wide open, allowing the rain to pour in all over his furniture. The wind pushed around more bottles left on the floor, being heard clinking together faintly. Jay opened the door fully and made his way out of the room, stopping for a moment to lean against the wall and once again grab at his forehead. The longer he was awake, the worse the throbbing in his head got. It felt like someone was grabbing at his brain and squeezing, a sensation that was nearly enough to make him vomit. He stumbled his way to the window, making an effort not to trip over any of the miscellaneous bottles left about or his coffee table that sat right next to it, covered.
Okay, now real question. I was about to say that until I got too invested in the story, but if your window was left open, did you leave it open? And if not, get out of your house. I think someone's in there. Just get out of your house.
Covered in burnt cigarette butts and ash. The carpet he had under his couch was drenched, combining with the frigid winds coming through the window to make Jay feel as though he were freezing. He shivered as he used all the energy he had to slam the window closed, and then he stood there for a moment. Did I open the window when I came home? He thought to himself, trying and failing to recollect the events that transpired only hours before. Jay came home in a drunken state, barely even able to walk through the door as he made his way to bed. Nights like this were common for him. It was just his way of working through the day-to-day life that was Carpenter's Landing. The town wasn't kind to him, nor the majority of people that made the mistake of calling it home. Sometimes it was easier just to spend the night drinking, hoping you'd forget everything the next morning. Eventually, Jay decided that it was for the best that he just go back to bed, not worrying about whatever it was he got up to hours before. His headache wasn't going away for a while, and the last thing he wanted was to stay awake any longer for it to get worse. He mustered up the strength to make the short trek back to his room, nearly falling over at one point and using the wall for support. As he arrived there, he practically collapsed onto his bed, not even being bothered to pull his blanket back over himself. Jay tried to drift back to sleep, but that was when he noticed something else that was odd. A smell that now permeated through his room. Burnt cigarettes. He knew that smell better than any, and it was strong. Not even bothering to open his eyes again, he felt around his bed blindly to see if maybe he had left any out in the open. Nothing. Perhaps if he were completely sober or in less of a tired state, he would have given the smell more thought, but the grogginess of sleep was washing over him once more, and the accompanying headache now felt like a hammer continuously hitting against the front of his skull. All Jay wanted was to sleep, and so despite his suspicions, he soon drifted off once more. He was found dead the next morning.
I kinda expected to hear him find Jeff and then get killed, but turns out he just falls asleep and then dies. That's an interesting way to go. But hey, at least you're able to go out while you're asleep. Okay, I'm sorry for saying that. Anyway, Chapter 2, Samuel Morgan.
The storm from the night prior persisted into the early hours of the morning when Samuel Morgan got the call. Another victim of the ghost stalker found dead in his apartment on Cable Crescent. He was barely awake, shaking off the grogginess as he assured his partner over the phone that he would be there soon. He slowly shuffled his way out of bed, making an effort not to wake his wife, who was still fast asleep. Samuel made his way to the washroom, inspecting himself in the mirror to see if he was presentable enough to go to the crime scene as he was. The many sleepless nights were not kind to him. His already wrinkled face now had the addition of dark bags that hung low beneath his eyes. His mustache was unkempt, with new gray hairs flecked in alongside the brown. The same could be seen from his hair, with what was left of it shifting to a similar shade from age and stress.
As someone who does not work in the police force, I cannot understand what you're going through. Why did I point that out? Because I kind of thought I needed to be funny, or else you guys would leave. And I'm pretty sure not many of you are actually watching this anyway, so, yeah.
Good enough.
He mumbled to himself, making no attempt to tidy his appearance before getting ready. He simply slipped into his uniform from the day prior, grabbed whatever quick breakfast meal was left in the fridge for him, and stepped out the door before his wife could wake. The storm had somehow gotten worse than it was during the night. The sky was stained a deep shade of gray, bringing down cascades of dark water which flooded the streets like a river. Driving to the crime scene was a nightmare in that weather. Samuel had to take several detours due to his usual route being blocked off from the flooding, turning a 10-minute drive into 20. By the time he finally got there, paramedics were seen carrying the body out of the dilapidated apartment complex on a large stretcher. Samuel could see his partner, Norman Keller, waiting outside for him. The kid looked shaken up, as if this were his first crime scene all over again. He nervously paced back and forth in the pouring rain, letting it soak his uniform and drench his black hair that he kept slicked back to keep it out of his eyes. Lighting a cigarette, Samuel stepped out of his car to do the same song and dance he was used to by now. The moment Norman saw him approaching, he immediately broke free from the disassociated trance he was in, calling out to Samuel before he even got across the street.
What the hell took you so long?
He yelled, his arms folding into his chest. Samuel completely ignored this remark as he made his way towards his partner. Up close, he could now see that Norman was visibly shaking, but he couldn't tell if it was from the cold or whatever happened before he'd arrived. Norman went to provide the details of the murder, but got distracted the moment he got a good, proper look at Samuel. He pulled him aside, keeping his hand on his shoulder as he whispered to him,
Sam, I thought you told your wife you'd quit.
Norman pointed at the cigarette in Samuel's mouth. The older cop rolled his eyes at the comment, pulling the cigarette out of his mouth and stamping it on the ground.
Norman, does that really matter right now?
Samuel said as he turned back towards the apartment, staring up at the sorry state it was in. The complex, just like every other building on Cable Crescent, looked like it should have been abandoned years ago. The building was one giant, soulless block of concrete with windows shoddily implemented into the sides of it to give the illusion of a proper living space.
Just give me the details. Same as the others.
His gaze never broke from the building as he spoke. Norman shook his head and lightly face-palmed, embarrassed that he even let himself get distracted from what was at hand.
Oh, right. Yeah, same as all the others. Caucasian, male, brunette, early 20s. Was found at around 5 in the morning by his sister who came by to check on him. Poor girl found him in his bed with his throat slashed.
Norman let out a
It seems that Jeff here has a type that he likes to kill.
long, exasperated sigh as he finished explaining.
And what about the family? Were you able to get in contact with anyone else?
Samuel asked, continuing the conversation as if he'd had it a million times before.
Only family we are currently aware of is the sister. No parents we can contact, and we're looking into any friends who may have known him.
Norman said as he now walked in front of Samuel, trying to grab his attention.
It's definitely our guy. Matches his whole MO to a T.
Witnesses?
Samuel responded, folding his arms as he slowly met his partner's gaze.
Nope. Nothing new that can help us find our guy. Just another victim to add to the list.
As Norman replied, Samuel went to speak but was interrupted as his partner suddenly piped up again, oddly excited.
But that doesn't mean we ain't getting any closer.
Samuel looked at Norman confused, raising one of his bushy eyebrows as he spoke.
Yeah, Norman. That is exactly what that means.
He said sarcastically. Norman immediately continued, not letting Samuel's snide remarks stop him.
No, you don't get what I mean. See, last night after you went home, I started doing a bit of detective work myself. And after a couple hours of digging into some old reports and talking to some people, I think we might be able to figure out who our guy is.
Samuel was surprised by the sudden conviction of his usually immature partner, but also took what he was saying with a grain of salt. Norman was, by all intents and purposes, still a rookie. He made reckless decisions that Samuel usually had to clean up after, so hearing this didn't inspire the awe that Norman had hoped. He tilted his head, waiting for Norman to continue.
Now, I can tell from your expression that you're skeptical, but trust me, I got something good here. Last night after you left, I got a call from someone claiming they had a run-in with our guy.
As Norman explained his process, he began to pace around in the rain like before.
I talked to them about it, and the account they gave me sounded oddly familiar. Like I'd heard the story before.
Please get on with it.
Samuel grumbled as he rubbed his hands against his head.
I was going to. You can't rush me here.
Norman responded, raising his voice slightly and moving his hands in an exaggerated fashion. It took him a moment to regain his train of thought before he could continue.
Anyways, I realized after talking to the guy why it sounded so familiar. A couple of guys a few months back reported some really similar encounters, and what do you know? When I decided to do a background check, all of these guys had the same description as our killer's victims. Caucasian, male, brunette, early 20s.
As he finished explaining, he stopped in his tracks completely, holding his arms in grandiose fashion, waiting for his partner's approval. Samuel did see the merit in Norman's research, but also couldn't help but find himself questioning it.
Interesting.
He said quietly, putting his hand to his chin, lost in thought.
And what makes you think it wasn't a coincidence? Do you have any way of proving these people's stories line up with our killer?
No,
Norman said with an odd amount of confidence.
and that, my friend, is why I asked them all to come to the station today.
You what?
Samuel asked, now more confused than ever.
Why would you even ask these people to come to the station with no proof they're even involved in this? You're working on a hunch.
As he spoke, Samuel sounded more and more exhausted with Norman's reckless actions, now rubbing his hands against his head as if to fight off a headache.
Sam, buddy, look, here's how I see it. Right now, a hunch is the best thing we have to work with. We've got a maniac on the loose and not a single lead as to who he could be. I figured that we could give this a shot. Let these people tell their stories, see if what they describe lines up with our guy, and if so, that might give us the info we need.
Norman explained, waving his hands in all different directions as he spoke. There was a long pause as Samuel considered what his partner was saying. He ultimately let out a long sigh as he agreed to play along.
Fine. We'll go to the station and see what they can tell us. But Norman, this better not waste our time.
It won't be. Trust me, I got a good feeling about this.
Norman cut off Samuel, already heading back to his car. As he swung the door open, he waved to Samuel, shouting to him from a distance.
I'll see you back at the station. Don't be late this time.
And with that, he drove off, splashing water from the street everywhere. Samuel soon followed his partner to the Carpenter's Landing Police Department, pulling over on the side of the road and stepping out of the car. As he made his way inside, he was greeted by Norman, who took him to where the three men were waiting to give their testimonies. Before they entered the room, Samuel voiced some concerns with his partner.
They haven't spoke to each other, have they? The men you called. I don't want their stories getting mixed up with each other.
He spoke sternly, making sure Norman understood what he was talking about.
No, they haven't. Each of them only arrived a little bit ago, and they're just waiting at the front desk to give their testimonies. None of their stories are going to be jumbled up with each other, so it'll be fine.
Norman reassured his partner, gesturing with his hands for him to calm down.
Now, if you want to wait in there...
He pointed towards the small room they stood in front of, the window revealing an empty white room with a table in the middle.
I can go get our first guy.
Samuel didn't say anything else. He simply opened the door and stepped foot into the interview room to wait for the first of the three witnesses. A few minutes passed by in silence, with Samuel reconsidering even bothering with this when he could be investigating any other leads regarding their killer. Before he could decide to just get up and leave, though, Norman arrived with the first of their witnesses. The man who walked in with him was a tall, larger fellow with brown stubble and a large black hoodie. His head was clean-shaven and he had a friendly look to him. He and Samuel shook hands before he took a seat at the table across from the officers.
Sam, this here is Bruce MacDonald.
Norman introduced the man now sitting with them, who gave a small, awkward wave in response.
I'm told, Bruce, that you had a run-in with someone who may be the guy we are currently looking for. What can you tell us about that night? We want all the details that you can provide.
Samuel made sure to speak in a softer tone than his usual speaking voice to try and make Bruce as comfortable as possible.
Well, I guess I better start with what my buddies and I were doing before anything happened.
Bruce said, trailing off as he began to explain his account of what happened the night he came face to face with death.